Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Cedric Daley. Let's get into your story. Tell people who you are. We'll go into the story and we'll see where we end up.
Okay, sounds good. So I said to Glenn, I'm a small fish when it comes to this, but I started in real estate.
I don't think so. There's a lot of smaller fish.
I'm born and raised in Cambridge. I started investing in real estate back in 2005. My dad, came to Canada in the 70s and, grew up in Cambridge and bought his first home back in the 70s. As a kid, we moved to Hespeler, and I saw my dad collecting rent checks. And as a kid, I said to myself, like, wow, I want to do this one day. So I had to ask my dad, I'm like, well, how does this work? You mean you get rent every month for doing what? It's like, well, I bought this property, paid it off, there's no mortgage, and now I'm renting it out. Like, wow. So that was in my mind, as growing up.
How early was that? I was pretty young.
Yeah, I was pretty young. I was probably 10, 11. I'd go to the house and I would work with them and do renovations, because every time a tenant left, I'd be in there with them. My older brother, Ken, we'd always be in there and we'd be drywalling, holding the light for him, taking a screwdriver, a hammer, and just working with them, right? It was pretty fun because I say, hey, you're working with your dad. He's fixing stuff.
Yeah. So
as time went on, I said, this is what I really want to start getting into. Now, I didn't think it could be a way of life. I never thought it'd be a full-time job. But, when I hit my 20s, I saved up some money and I bought my first home in Waterloo, actually, right by the University of Waterloo. Bought that back in 2005. And it was just cool because I had the one rental. It was cool. I lived at home still. So I had my job. I was working, lived at home.
First place.
Yeah. Just collected my rent. Right. And I bought that for 107, believe it or not, back in 107K. So that went well. Fast forward, I bought another property in Waterloo, scaled up that to a rent to own that I did in Woodstock and also in Kitchener. And I was the investor for them. And those were really good investments. Thanks to Ron Shipling, actually, probably know him in Cambridge. He used to drive around the Beetle, but he actually got me into the rent to owns, and it was great because both transactions were 2-year commitments where I put X amount of dollars in. The renter came in, lived it like it was their own. They gave me 24 post-dated checks. All I did was pay the mortgage. I paid the property tax and insurance, and I never heard from the tenant at all and basically we had a predetermined price afterwards that closed. And what I basically did then is I parlayed that money and I bought a fourplex out in Listowel. So basically my portfolio looks like this. I've sold a couple of properties, but basically I have 3 properties right now in Sault Ste. Marie, single family homes. One in Woodstock, a duplex, a single family home in Windsor, fourplex in Listowel. And then of course, primary residence here in Cambridge. So it's been going well, and then I just started investing in the U.S. is where I found you.
Why bother going to the U.S.? It sounds like you got it going on in Canada.
Well, yeah, a good question. I think what ended up happening, like when COVID hit, it kind of opened up my eyes because I saw obviously the prices, skyrocketed, right, especially in Kitchener-Waterloo region. So I wanted to read and Rich Dad Poor Dad, watching podcasts like yours, Andrew Hines' podcast, Sarah Larby's, etc. I realized this is a way of life for people. You can make a living doing this with the cash flow. So I knew that for me to maintain, my portfolio and continue to grow it, it's going to be very difficult in Ontario, right? I'm not buying in Toronto, right? Windsor's a great market to buy, so I got my first one there last October, which has been great. But now prices are increasing there. London's also increased. Kitchener-Waterloo prices are too high, so you're not going to cash flow. Woodstock's still a good market, but I looked at it. If I'm going to spend $600,000, $500,000 on a property to get, $2,000 in rent, doesn't make sense, right? I started looking in the U.S. And how that happened actually was started learning how to wholesale, right? Had a lot of friends talk a lot about wholesaling. They said, one of my friends, Shane, actually, and Nikki, he said to me, "Hey, you ever looked into wholesaling?" I'm like, "Well, not really, but took some time. I watched a lot of Jerry Norton videos, right?
Yeah.
Self-taught, just kind of went on to YouTube. I watched Flipman. I watched a ton of those videos.
I've
During
watched
COVID.
Flipman's awesome.
Yeah. Right? So,
Yeah.
but you see, it just shows you when you put your mind to something, you can do it. And I started, watching these videos and just taking notes, trying to learn. And so first thing, literally, I started looking at prices in the US, and I stumbled across Jackson, Mississippi. Actually, my brother and his wife used to live in Jackson, Mississippi. So, for most of my career, I worked for BlackBerry. We didn't even know you and I worked at the same time.
Yeah, I used to work at BlackBerry. Yeah.
So that got me in the US. I used to travel all through the US when I was at BlackBerry as an account executive. Yeah. And that's why I spent a lot of time in the South, right? So I spent a lot of time in Memphis, Little Rock, Arkansas, Mississippi, etc.
Yeah.
So I knew those markets really well. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start off with markets that are not the hot areas to start off with. So I knew, Mississippi is a great state, but it's not, nobody's really dying to say, hey, I want to invest there. So I figured if I can, cut my teeth into Mississippi, and if I make mistakes, not a big deal. Much different than work focusing on Phoenix or Miami, you know what I mean? So I started off in Jackson, Mississippi. So first thing I did is I went,
great strategy. I'm trying to cut you off. I did the exact same thing in Alabama. It was like they're basically right beside each other. But yeah, no, it's the same thing. It's like that's not a very attractive place to a lot of people.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah.
No, you're begging. You and I think a lot alike. Yeah. We live in the same city. We invest right next door to each other. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started. So I looked at Mississippi, and I'm like, well, if I make mistakes, not the end of the world. So first thing I did, and I'm going to share this tip with anybody that's looking to start wholesaling. I went in and I went on to Craigslist. First thing I did, right? I know I have a lot of friends that invest in leads and do lead generation, but I went on Craigslist. It's free. I started looking at what properties are available there. I started seeing. I saw some homes for 10 grand, 5 grand, 20 grand. Again, I had to do a double take because again, Glenn, right? We're in Canada. We're looking, you can't get a shoebox for that. You can't even get a car.
Can't get a parking spot. No, nothing. Right? Yeah.
So to your point, like I said, okay, we're on to something. And I looked at some of these conditions. A lot of them were dilapidated, understand. But the strategy was, well, let me make these calls. So I started calling up some of these owners. I said, hey, name's Cedric Daley. I'm new to wholesaling. I'm very upfront with them. I said, hey, what do you want for this property? And they, everybody was really receptive because they wanted these properties. A lot of these were sitting in Kijiji, in Craigslist forever. So when I called them, they were happy to take my call. So I said, okay, well, tell me what you want for them. So we negotiated and said, okay. So what I did is I did a verbal commitment with them. I said, okay, I'll send over the contracts, right? I'll start working with you. And I let them know my intent. I wasn't going to buy it, but I was going to work on a buyer's list. But here's the interesting part, Glenn. I had absolutely no buyers ready to go, right? So it was. So I set it up where I'm going to give me 7 days, right? 7 days to get this going. So locked it up under contracts. And then from there, I started searching. Instead of sellers, I started searching for buyers. Long story short, there's one guy that really got me into this game. And his name is Maurice Henderson. And just by fluke, called him and he answered the phone. And I just said, hey, looking for some buyers.
So this is a guy in the States, and
yeah, he's actually.
How'd you find this guy?
Literally, I tell you, man, I'm a guy that believes in God, a man of faith, and I can tell you by the grace of God, because there's no way, just on a fluke, called, he answered. He was on Craigslist. He answered the phone, and we had a chat. We talked for a good hour, and he introduced me to JV. I didn't know anything about joint venturing with wholesaling, right? I knew joint venturing when you're doing the burst strategy or you're doing investments here in Canada. I didn't know it existed with wholesaling. So he talked to me about that. He went over some of the details. He's like, I like your energy. He goes, you're just starting. I'm like, yeah, I'm just starting off, and I'm all ears. Give me the 411. So he basically groomed me and gave me a tutorial of wholesaling and how it works. And instead of focusing on in Memphis, Mississippi, focus in Memphis. It's a bigger market. There's a lot of investors up there. There's a lot of properties that the prices are reasonable, and it's a landlord friendly city.
Yep.
So I was like, wow, this is no brainer. So right away I shifted away from Mississippi, and I focused my attention on Memphis. So I went in, started searching for buyers. So I built up about 360 buyers in Memphis now, 360 buyers. And basically I from there, the sky was the limit and the rest was history. I basically learned how to wholesale, used what Maurice taught me, and then I met some really good friends along the way, other wholesalers like a Ron Brooks, a good friend of mine. He's a wholesaler that's down, an investor down in Memphis, and so list goes on and on and on. So basically that allowed me to feel more comfortable in that market, because now I got friends and people that I'm working with and doing business with on the real estate front in Memphis, in the city that I want to focus on. And so from there, I started looking at properties, right, that I want to buy myself, and I bought my first one down there for $30K, okay, $30,000. And again, this is not a double take, $30,000 on 1,000 square feet. It's in the area called Fraser, which is an up and coming area in Memphis. All right, so it's kind of a suburb there, but it's if you look at the zip, it's 38127. But it's close to Raleigh, which is where there's a Nike factory there. There's Amazon there, so it's a really good rental market. So bought that first property earlier this year. Bought it for $30K. Renter was in there for $525 a month. But what's great about Memphis, Glenn, is the property taxes. I think property tax, I want to say, is $399 a year. Okay. The insurance, because I have a property manager that I'm working with there, and Rivertown is who I'm using, and thanks to Pauline for that. It's another person I met through networking, and she connects me with him, and I use him. He charges me 10% a month. He manages the property, and that's $525 a month. I'm cap rate on that property. It's about 14%, just solid. Right, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that up here. All right, so that's went well, and then I was like, wow, I'm going to continue looking. So I bought a second property, $39,000, right down the street, right, literally a 2-minute drive.
Got your
right?
neighborhood, yeah.
Right. So now I got two there, and I bought that one for $39K. Renters in there paying $700 a month in rents on properties. Again, 1,000 square feet, 3-bed, 1-bath, all brick, and it's one thing I'll say, that ARV of that property is valued at $75K. Right, so I got it for a steal. And so there's a lot of equity there, and even on the first one at 30, if you look it up, it's worth about 75. So between two properties, 150 grand is what they're valued at, and I got both of them, one for 30, one for 39. Now
so you're on the same road. So is it because you did marketing for that road, or like? Honestly,
it's funny. Again, everything, it's just a fluke by fluke. It fell on my lap.
Okay.
And I saw this is on Whitney, and I looked. I was like, okay, Whitney. I
know that place. Yeah.
So it's right down the street. I'm like, okay, perfect. So I went hard. I talked to that seller. I negotiated. It was a long time negotiating, because originally she wanted top dollar for it, right? But we're able to negotiate and make it work. And now I got those two properties, and and I'm getting a new renter in at the end of this month for $900 a month rent, right? So
on 37,000, like that, yeah. And like you guys, everyone likes to talk about the 1% rule too. You're hitting the 3% or close to the 3% rule, right? And 2.5% rule, yeah. Just awesome. Your first one, when you're doing the wholesaling, you're talking about Louisiana, right? What happened to
Mississippi?
Mississippi. Sorry. One of those places in there. Geographically, my mind was over in that area. But what happened? So do you sell it to that guy?
So good question. So no, what ended up happening was when I started looking at Mississippi, I started, I did try to move a lot of these properties, but I realized there just wasn't enough buyers, especially in Jackson, to warrant me spending my efforts there. So I said, okay, because again, I have a full-time job. So a lot of these calls I'm doing, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So I'd have to wake up early in the morning. There's a time difference, 1 hour central time there. So I'd have to, on my lunchtime, I'd be making calls. So, it's a grind. And I'll tell you, there wasn't a big buyers list for Mississippi. So that's so I ended up having to go back to and say, hey, wasn't able to move this, but let me know anything else that comes down the pipe. But I think a lot of these sellers like the fact that if you're wholesaling, you let them know that, what your intent is, as opposed to trying to pretend like you're buying it, and then you have an inspection contingency, and you don't find a buyer. Now all of a sudden you've locked up a property for a month when you've caused them to potentially lose other buyers. So I've never done it that way. So
No, that's
so
it.
it didn't work
That's
out
honest.
that way.
It's honest.
Yeah.
It's the way to do it. Because
Yeah.
that otherwise people, they're gonna expect you to buy it.
Yeah, no, exactly. But wholesaling has been fantastic, I tell you, Glenn, and it's been a way to make some good money doing it, obviously, and thanks to you, you've connected me with Ali and Brent. So it's been great. So they're also helping me with my my taxes on the wholesaling side because it's gone better than expected. To be honest with you, this was just a when I saw COVID hit, I'm like, okay, I got to look at another revenue stream, right? I have my rental properties, got my full-time job. I do some private lending as well, where I use the HELOC, right, on my rentals, and I lend that out. So I get it at 2.95%, and I lend it out at 13% as a second mortgage, right? So I'm, netting 10% on the bank's money, right?
Yeah.
Which is also, you can write that off tax time. So I had to look at another stream. Just, I have 2 young kids. Got to make sure that there's more income coming in. You never know, right? How long these lockdowns are going on for. You never know what's going to happen with the renters, right? Because it's a tough situation, in terms of job losses, layoffs, etc. So, yeah.
So you transferred from Mississippi to Memphis.
Yeah.
And then you know what runs through my head whenever I heard you say that? Because you're talking about there wasn't buyers down there, and I'm like, huh. I'm like, maybe there's an opportunity. Anytime I hear something, maybe there's an opportunity. Like, I'm like, maybe I should be looking at, because I'm always looking at new markets here and there, and sometimes, but I'm like, maybe Mississippi could be, if you're on the other side of the coin, right? Fill the need.
You make a very good point, Glenn. And I'll tell you this. So learning it now, I've been sunk my teeth in this since COVID started. Northern Mississippi is a hot market. So we're talking South Haven, Olive Branch, like Walls, like that northern part of Mississippi. Because if you look at Memphis, it's right on that border of Mississippi, right? So you can get to Mississippi in less than an hour. Like I think it's like half an hour. I actually think 20 minutes. So that area there is booming, right? You got gated communities. It's top dollar. So anything in like Olive Branch, it's going quickly. Right? Anything like South Haven, it's going quickly. So, I realize, that's a hot market because there's investors that will invest in northern Mississippi, even though Memphis is their market, but they won't invest more south in like Jackson or further south. So they'll stay right in that northern Mississippi, Memphis area. So that's my sweet spot now. So for me, it's, I've set up a good system now with some other wholesalers where there's properties I want to buy myself. So I'm on lists myself. I'm on mailing list. So I'll get deals thrown to me all the time. And I'll look at it and say, okay, well, do I want it for myself? Maybe. If I'll lock this up and then flip it with an assignment fee. And that's kind of how I've done it. So it's been working well.
Cool. And so what's the plan going forward? Is it to do the wholesaling? Is it to do the buy and holds, or buy, reno and hold? Or like what are you going forward doing?
Good question, Glenn. My goal is the money that I make from wholesaling, every penny that I make there, obviously I got to pay my tax. I got to save about 30% goes to the IRS. But what I'm focusing on doing is the money that I'm getting from wholesaling, I'm turning that and flipping that to buy more rental properties. So the goal is to keep buying assets. You know how quickly it is. You get 50K. As soon as you get it, it's out. You need a new pool, or you need you're doing a new deck. That money goes quickly. So from my perspective is I'm putting that back into the Memphis market and continuously buying. So my next deal that's coming in, I'm using that and I'm buying another property and continue buying it. And no mortgages, right? Cash, which is kind of why I reached out to you for the HELOC, right? At least up in Canada, you can do a HELOC on rental properties. Yeah. I found in the States, especially, in Tennessee, credit unions, a lot of the banks, they do not want to lend on non-primary properties. They do not want to do HELOCs on them. And the ones that do, you have to have less than 4 properties for them to do it. But that's what I'm looking at doing. The money I'm getting from wholesale is going right back into that Memphis market, and I'm buying. My sweet spot is, sub 50K. So I want to get properties below that 50K mark that can rent out for $900 to $1,000 a month. Right. And then I'm flipping everything over to Patrick, who's a property manager, and he's managing everything for me. And I love his system because it's all paperless. He has a portal. Rent gets deposited to the portal. I can go in there to see the repairs. I've actually also taken it to another level thanks to Ron. I set up American Home Shield. So if you ever, I don't know if you heard of American Home Shield, but it's great for rentals because I'm paying on the first property $45 a month, on the second one $50 a month. What's great about it, Glenn, is it covers everything. Electronics, it covers electrical problems, it covers if there's roof damage, it covers appliances. So say your fridge goes in your rental property. Yeah. If you just go leaning on the property manager, you now have to have a bill of $1,000, if not more, to get a new, get the old refrigerator.
There's probably a deductible though, right?
Yeah, $100 deductible.
Well, that's nothing.
I know. I know. So
wait, so you're paying $45 a month to have like appliances and stuff covered?
It covers plumbing, covers electrical, roof, even covers the tenants' electronics. What else does it cover? Basically everything other than like the major stuff, like floors. They're not gonna, like, if you're damaged floors,
how the hell do they make that work? How do they make that work? I feel like I have almost every building I have. I get something breaks every year. Something
think of
even
HVAC.
Yeah.
Think of HVAC. It covers HVAC, AC, and furnace covered. $100 fee. And then after they either got to repair it, if they can't repair it, they replace it. No extra cost. To me, Glenn, it was a no-brainer. I'm like, I will do it for the peace of mind. So I'm not going to have these bills from my property manager of $500, $600, $700. I don't want that. I pay the $100, right? And they take care of everything else. And what
have you done some claims? Like, what's the turnaround time? Like,
what's funny about that? We had one plumbing issue, and my property manager forgot to go through American Home Shield. So I went on the portal. I'm like, wait a second, $125. And I'm like, hey, Patrick, you're supposed to use American Home Shield. She's like, oh, sorry about that. I'm his only client that has it. So he put the note in there and he's like, sorry, it's not going to happen again. There's a delta of $25. So like, who cares? But,
oh no, yeah.
But going forward, yeah, like I set him up in the system so when he can call on my behalf to American Home Shield, because they know they have Patrick in there as a property manager. So now I don't have to be dealing with that. It's just, and the $100 will just come off from the rent that they collect, because they keep a month back, right? So they collect the rent that's sitting in the account, and then from there, whatever they need to deduct, they deduct their 10%, and then whatever, if they have to pay the $100, and it's covered. So I never have to deal with it. So to me, it's really effortless investing, which is what I love.
So is that your insurance, or you have an insurance policy on top of that?
Even better, right? So it's not the insurance, but because of Patrick, why I use them is they have a program with Lips and Comb, I believe they're called, and it's a bulk discount just for Rivertown clients. So my insurance on the first property, you're gonna laugh when I say this, it's about $400 and change for the year. Okay, for insurance. And for the second one, it was about $575 for the year. So you pay it up front, it's all done just on the credit card, and I'm covered. So and he uses it, he's an investor too, which is why I like to use him as a property manager. I always like property managers that have rental properties themselves, so they can kind of understand, our language, right? Yep. So it's not foreign in them. So but yeah, so it's been good. Probably one of the best things I've done, and I'm just going to continue building. The goal is to get about 10K a month cash flow in the US.
I'm still blown away by this. So like, do they have to do like an inspection, this American Home Shield, before they?
No,
because
no.
What couldn't you use them like basically as the rent out? Like,
you could.
Hey, I bought this place. Like, the plumbing's no good.
Well, it's funny you say that. You know what I did? You're gonna laugh at this. So before closing on the first one, it was weird because the owner was very concerned to have me talk to the tenants. Every time I buy. In Canada, I always want, in a stipulation in my contract, I want to have a conversation with the tenant. And why I say that, and it's the best practice, because the seller and the property manager, there's so much going on. They're not going to know the little small things that are happening, right? I need to know exactly from that tenant, because a lot of times when I buy, I like buying with the tenant in there, because it's automatic rental income coming in, right? I like that. I don't like to ever have a house vacant. I don't want that. So when I spoke to the seller, I said, well, can I talk to the tenant? And they kept giving me the runaround. They did not want me to talk to the tenant. So I said, okay, well, I just want to see if they want to stay, how things are going, if there's any major renovations that need to be done. And obviously they didn't want me to talk to them, because then you know what's going to happen. I'm going to ask for them to include those renovations or deduct it off the purchase price. Yeah. So they didn't let me do it. So what I ended up doing, I said, okay, well, I have it still as a condition. I'm getting my inspection done. So I hired a company there in Memphis. They went and did the inspection. So we found there were some major issues with plumbing, right? They had some major leaks, electrical issues. So I took that report, right, which I paid for. I paid $450 for it, but money well spent. I took that report and I sent it to the seller. I said, hey, we're good for the $30K, but I want these items here highlighted. I want them repaired. And we're already down the path of about to close. So they said they did it. So they went and did the fix. They fixed up everything. And I sent one of my good buddies there, Ron, to make sure he checked it out, to make sure everything was in good working order. And that rest was history. So yeah, but yeah, American Home Shield's been great. They're solid. So I'm very happy. I wish we had something like that in Canada. I'd use them in my rental properties.
I don't even know how it even makes money. I don't know from their side. I don't know how it makes it work.
Yeah.
And I love this strategy that you're doing, right? You know, you do some wholesaling, you use it to buy houses in cash. It's compared to what I'm doing with these renovations and stuff. You're not dealing with all this nonsense, right? But you're into it right off the bat. You just have to have the wholesaling side of it, right? Because otherwise you're going to run out of cash.
Exactly.
You're going to run out of cash. It doesn't matter how rich you are. You can only buy so many $30,000 properties.
You've got it. You've got it. Yeah. And to your point, Glenn, and I do like the burst strategy. I do like your strategy of fixing up, flipping.
Yeah.
But see, my only fear, and the reason why I never started that way, was I've done flips. I'm actually doing one in the Sioux right now. It's supposed to go on the market in a couple of days. So bought that one for 88, right, in Sault Ste. Marie. Put $20K into it. Listing it for 149, right? And actually used good company for lending. They're called Calvert Mortgages. They're out in Calgary. So they did a blanket loan, right, for me, and I only had to put up $3,000 for the closing costs, and then so it's been great. And then monthly payments like $750. So to me, it's good. They just put they basically did a loan, or basically a blanket loan as collateral on 2 of my properties up in the Sioux. So that kind of gave them, all 3 properties, they have security there. So back to why I didn't want to start off with flips in Memphis, is because I know that when you're not there, it's hard to trust. It's hard to trust these contractors, right? When you're not there, right?
Yeah.
So you have a good system in place. I want to get to that point and maybe start doing some flips down there and potentially do some bursts. I see a lot of homes that are like $10,000, $15,000 ARV, 70, 80, you put 30,000 in there, then you go and you refinance, pull out your capital and rinse and repeat, do the burst strategy, right? So I know
there's so many good strategies. That's what I love. That's why I love interviewing people, because you get all this different stuff, different ideas all the time. Love it. And I'm going to look into this American Home Shield.
Just go. American Home Shield. ahs.com. And Ron is there, my buddy there. He's the one that told me about it. So when I said, like, I know, being a landlord here in Canada, washer, dryer, fridge goes, stove, but it's, if you don't have a property manager, it can be
well, this is the other thing too, is now when you're dealing with this, it's even another thing to take off the table, that because the whole property management is an expensive cost on your line item list, right? You go, if you have all that stuff, you still have to cover the phone calls, which no one really wants to do. But it's almost like a negotiation strategy even with the property manager, because you're not going to have to fix any stuff. You just have to get the call, make the call. Because like, even for me, if I do a lease option or like a rent to own, I can usually get a discounted, I do get a discounted rate on my property management, because they're not in charge of fixing anything, right? All they're doing is in charge of collecting rent. So this would be very similar, collecting rent, but they have to still take the call and then make the call. but still pretty.
It's funny. I should go back to Patrick and ask for a discount because he's not gonna do all the legwork. All he has to do is the rent's collected electronically, right? They go and deposit electronically, right? So yeah. I guess the only thing is the rehab, floors or bathrooms. They're not going to cover that stuff.
The tenant turnover stuff, yeah,
turnover stuff. So
yeah. It's an interesting idea. Cool. You know what? Let's wrap this up. Cedric, people want to get a hold of you. Where do they track you down?
Email. I'm always on email. Cedric.daley@gmail.com. First name CEDRIC.Daley DALEY @gmail.com. So readily accessible there, and feel free to email me anytime. I'm always here to help, and I have a lot of my friends that I've told what I'm doing in the States, so I'm kind of giving them the blueprint. I'm always here to help. Right at the end of the day, you've helped me, Glenn, because because of your show, I've been able to connect with some of your contacts, right? And I think in this world, the more you give and help people, will come back to you right down the road.
That's exactly the strategy.
So,
I don't get paid for doing a podcast.
Exactly.
This isn't a paid event. No, you just do it, and you give out, and it comes around. It's a big circle.
100%, my friend.
Totally agree. Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, Cedric. I think this is an awesome one. I'm probably gonna. I know I'm going to listen to this one on my own. Just American Home Shield on its own was.
Yeah.
I hope that everybody listens to this episode, because that alone could save you that's like the best. That's the money saving tip of the year.
Oh,
right there.
I tell you, I was a kid in a candy store, Glenn. I just couldn't fathom it. So I use Reliance here on my rental properties, and that only covers HVAC, right, and plumbing.
And not even the stuff that breaks on the HVAC.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I've had the heat exchange.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I've had the same story here.
Oh, but yeah, 100%. It's been a great program, and the cost is minimal. You pay monthly, right off your credit card. So simple.
Love it. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Glenn.
We'll stay in touch.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Sounds good, my friend. Take care.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.